A Patrick Sycamore story. Alice Within the Fog by Dakota-Storm, Boggan Thompson. Part 1. Cornwall is known for many things. Old buildings, shut down tin mines, culture, food, and of course their holiday trade. In the winter, Cornwall effectively shuts down and lives of what it has earned during the summer trade. Cornwall is also known for its legendary creatures, such as the Knockers, the Midnight Washerwomen, and Zenor, the Mermaid. Only people who have visited Cornwall in the winter will know of the green fog. The fog rolls in from the sea and is so dense that it reduces visibility to scarcely 4 feet. Many events have happened in Cornwall. Some have been recorded, others have not. I had travelled home after reading Vincent Straw's letter and emptied the antique chest that I had taken with me to Crowland. The reason being that I intended to repack it with the instruments necessary for the absolute destruction of Straw. I also replaced my clothes with ones more suitable for strong and bitter winter temperatures. Winter had come early, it seemed, and even when I pulled up in my Hillman Hunter GLS, I had observed some patches of snow on the ground. I made a phone call to the Vatican and asked to speak to the Pope.
"Well done," he said. "You have done an excellent job in ridding London of its imps, although I do hear that you left soon after."
"Listen," I began. "How fast can you get one of the relics of my choosing over to me? You owe me that."
"I would say a day," said the Pope.
"Make it half a day," I said. "I'm going down to Cornwall, and I will need one of the relics for this job."
"Which one would you like?"
asked the Pope. "The thorn."
"From the crown of thorns?"
said the Pope. "Yes," I replied.
"You are asking for something that holds significant religious value," said the Pope. "But, as per our agreement, I will have it sent to you immediately by helicopter."
"No trickery," I said. There was silence down the phone for a moment before the Pope replied,
"No trickery."
"You know where I live." "Thank you," I said, before putting down the receiver. If I was going to fight Vincent, then this holy relic would most definitely come in handy. I knew for a fact that the thorn had the ability to destroy immortality. I had read about it in the Codex and made a mental note of it. I knew that the Pope would have the thorn delivered to me in less than half a day, so I had just enough time to rest and have a bite to eat. I fed Max before I set him loose into the field behind my house for exercise. I dozed off for a couple of hours in my armchair and awoke fully refreshed. I had a bacon sandwich and called Max back from his roaming around the field. I took Max into my study, something which I rarely did, and sat him down next to my chair. Vincent Straw was playing a game with me, and I knew it. All that I had to do was work out a way of finishing it. Vincent had told me in his letter that I would next find his handiwork in Cornwall. What horrors awaited me, I wondered. I flipped through the pages of the Codex, searching for something that could help me in my mission to destroy Straw. Something in the back of my mind told me to flip to the last page. When I did, I saw an illustration of a woman with a silk scarf around her neck and face. I read the paragraph about the mysterious illustration. It said, "Here is a drawing of the Guardian, drawn from memory by a priest on his deathbed. The Guardian is powerful. She is capable of many things, and has been on the earth since before life. She has fought many powerful creatures, some of which gave rise to more modern evils. An example of this is the battle she had with the Cele Intunicat, otherwise known as the Dark Ones. In this battle she lost one eye, but nevertheless managed to trap her adversary in a dimension called the Void. She later trapped the lesser members of the Dark Ones, who were later named as members of the Pre-Infernum. They who call upon her power, beware. Though she fights evil, she will not allow herself to be scorned." I wondered whether or not this ancient one would be able to assist me. Perhaps she held the power to destroy Vincent Straw. I heard the thump of helicopter blades outside and made my way out to watch. The white Vatican helicopter landed in the large field outside of my house, and I saw someone jump out of it, clutching a box. A man ran towards me and saluted with the sign of the cross. I returned the salute and took the box from the man. "Tell the Pope, thanks," I said to the man before turning and going back into my house. I watched the helicopter ascend through my study window before I opened the leather-clad wooden box. Held between two thick foam bricks was the thorn. I smiled and closed the lid. I packed my car's boot with various holy weapons, such as a large wooden crucifix made from olive tree wood. I put Max in the back seat, took one last look at my house as I started the engine, and set off. Part 2. It took me 4.5 hours to reach Cornwall. There was a thick layer of snow on the ground, and I had to drive slowly, lest I skid on any hidden ice. I pulled over and asked a large, red-faced man if there are any hotels or inns open. "Sorry, lad, there's nothing open at the moment." "Are you sure?" "Well," said the Cornishman, "the shipping at Mousel might be open, but I can't guarantee it though." "Thanks," I said. I was just about to close my window when the red-faced man leaned down and said, "You want to be careful. There's something going on. I can feel it in the air." "What do you mean?" I queried. "Watch out for the green fog, and don't go near any of the cliffs when it's around." "Thanks for the advice," I said, closing my window. I drove off in the direction of Mousehole, following the signs, and hunted around the town until I found the Ship Inn. The inn was a big brown building which looked out on a bay. It was truly a lovely view. I made my way into the building with Max at my side. The inside of the inn was a sight to see. It had wooden walls and a long bar. There was only a few people inside the inn, and I made my way over to the bar. An older woman came to me as I sat down and looked me over. "What do you fancy, my lovely?" she said. "I would like a room for 3 days," I began. "I would also like to try one of your stargazy pies. I've heard about them from friends who have visited your inn. A plate of 5 cooked sausages, a bottle of beer poured into a bowl, and a brandy." "I can help you with the food and drink," said the woman, "but I wouldn't recommend mixing pork with fish." At that point, Max put his front paws on the bar counter and looked at the woman with his tongue lolling out. "The sausages are for him," I said, pointing at the huge Rottweiler. "I see," said the woman. "I'm afraid I can't help you with a room, though. None of them have been cleaned yet, and there are no sheets." I pulled my wallet from the inside of my coat pocket, opened it, and put 4 50-pound notes on the counter. "Are you sure there are no rooms?" I queried, with a friendly smile. "I'll see what I can do," said the woman. "I'm Mrs. Oram." I shook Mrs. Oram's hand and introduced myself and my canine companion. When Mrs. Oram put the stargazy pie in front of me, my eyes locked with those of the multiple fish staring at me through the crust. "I feel like I'm in a staring competition," I said to Mrs. Oram. I put Max's plate of sausages on the floor, as well as his bowl of beer, and saw him tuck into his meal. I ate my pie and let my tongue tingle with the flavours. "What are you in Cornwall for, then?" asked Mrs. Oram, putting her elbows on the counter and cradling her head in her hands. "I'm conducting an investigation," I replied, finishing the last mouthful of my pie. "You're a policeman?" said Mrs. Oram. "I used to be," I said. "This is a different type of investigation." "What type is it, then?" "I'm investigating something supernatural," I replied. "A man called Vincent Straw." "I've never heard of him," said Mrs. Oram. "It's just as well," I said. "He is truly the most evil creature to ever walk the earth." I heard Max bark loudly and I turned to see why. A large, burly-looking man was standing, looking at the Rottweiler, swiping his hands out in front of the dog. "I'd stop," I said. "Who's gonna stop me?" the man said. "You?" "I won't need to stop you," I said. "Owen, stop it," said Mrs. Oram. "Why are you protecting this wuss?" said Owen. "Max," I said, noticing that the Rottweiler stiffened up and looked at me. "Speak." The huge dog launched himself at the big Cornishman and knocked him down onto the open floor of the inn. The man tried to punch Max on the side of the neck, but missed thanks to the dog's agility. Max scratched through Owen's coat and drew blood. "I hate it when people think that they can be rude and get away with it," I said to Mrs. Oram, who was still cradling her head in her hands. As Max grabbed Owen's throat between his jaws, I said, "Be still." The Rottweiler stopped moving, as did Owen. I walked over to the two still figures and bent down close to Owen's face. "I would recommend apologizing," I said. Max looked at me with his eyes, waiting for my next command. "I'm sorry," said Owen, struggling to breathe a little. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to buy me, Mrs. Oram, and my friend Max a drink. Then you're going to clean up any blood that's on the floor. And then you're going to go home. Understood?" "Yes," said Owen. "Release," I said to Max. The Rottweiler let go of the man's throat and sat back down next to my seat. As I sat back down, Owen got up and put a £10 note on the counter. "I'd like to buy the three of you a drink," he said. "Good man," I said with a smile. While Mrs. Oram poured 2 brandies and refilled Max's bowl with beer, Owen mopped up his spilt blood and left. Part 3. Mrs. Oram showed me to a small room with moss-green walls and garishly bright yellow curtains. Mrs. Oram also made arrangements for Max to sleep in the kitchen. I carried my cases of equipment up to my room and arranged them into one corner. I was just about to leave my room when I heard a loud tapping. I looked around the room but saw nothing. As I turned again to leave, the tapping began again. I opened the intensely bright yellow curtains and found the cause of the noise was a crow with a small scroll tied to its leg. I opened the window and let the crow hop onto my hand. I gently untied the scroll from the large bird's leg and read it. "To my dear Mr. Sycamore, I am glad to see that you arrived safely in Cornwall. You will first see my handiwork in Poldark Mine. I'd bring a torch if I were you. Yours, Vincent Straw." I placed the message down on my bed and went back to the window. The crow flapped his wings and flew away. Vincent had piqued my interest. What, I wondered, could be down Poldark Mine? I left the room and made my way to my car. It took me about 45 minutes to reach Poldark Mine, which I found was a closed-for-the-season tourist attraction surrounded by a wire fence. There was no security, it seemed, so I set about cutting a hole in a part of the fence with a pair of wire cutters. I entered the tourist attraction and stood very still. A very distant noise reached my ears, the noise of stone being chipped. I took out a crucifix from my pocket and waited. The chipping sound ceased, and I heard the sound of scrambling in the direction of a sturdy-looking wooden structure. I walked silently towards the building and stepped through a door. The building was lit by small lanterns. The air inside was most sour, and I was half tempted to walk straight back out of the building. The scrambling sound came from a huge hole in the stone floor, above which was a large metal lift. I also observed a metal ladder that was integrated into the side of the hole that led downwards into the murky depths of the mine. I decided to use the ladder for a quieter descent. After taking my shoes off, I climbed, without the aid of a light, down the ladder into the mine. After reaching the bottom, I put my shoes back on and looked around into the darkness, searching for even a pinprick's worth of light. I found a sign of illumination coming from the left of the ladder, and I made my way towards it. As I approached the light, I heard the sound of frustrated voices. I came across a scene that has forever been etched into my mind. A great many 2-foot-tall, white-bearded men in very old-style miners' clothes were at work chipping away bits of stone and restoring supports. I looked at the creatures in stunned amazement and realized that I had come across knockers. I heard someone yell, and I looked around to see the source of the exclamation. All of the knockers fell silent and stared directly at me. One of the knockers, about a foot taller than the rest, walked up to me and said to his fellows, "It's a man." A low murmuring rose from the crowd of knockers. "What do you want here?" queried the large knocker. "I'm here to find the handiwork of Vincent Straw," I replied. The knockers all seemed to gasp and look at each other. "We might be able to help you there," said the large knocker. "What's his name?" called someone in the crowd. "My name is Patrick Sycamore." "My name's Keaton," said the large knocker. "We've had some trouble recently in the mines. Something keeps attacking us." "What does it look like?" I asked. "Ugly," said Keaton. "Does it have any particular physical features?" I asked with a smile. "Well," began Keaton, "its skin is red and scaly, and it's got a huge pair of wings. It's a demon," I said. "We were going to try and kill it ourselves tonight," said Keaton, "when it came up from the tunnels. We intended on using our pickaxes on it." "That won't work, I'm afraid," I said. "Why?" "A demon must be killed with something holy. It's not something that you can just clobber to death." "I see," said Keaton. "Could you kill it?" "I could," I replied. A deafening roar rose from one of the tunnels. "What's coming?" someone shouted. "I need everyone out of the mine now," I said to Keaton. "It will be done," said the knocker, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small whistle. Keaton blew the whistle, and the crowd of knockers began to rush past me towards the exit. "What will you do?" asked Keaton. "Kill it as fast as possible," I replied. "Take this," said the knocker, passing me his small pickaxe. "It'll bring you luck." "Thank you," I said. Keaton ran off behind me, and I picked up one of the oil lamps. I began to walk towards one of the tunnels when I saw something move in the shadows. Something big. The demon was upon me before I realized it, its clawed hands grabbing my shoulders and pulling me towards it. I struck wildly and saw in the light of my lamp that I had struck it in its face, or as I should say, one of its faces. I had no recollection of ever being in combat with a two-headed demon. The monster dropped me onto the ground and roared loudly. "I am Patrick Sycamore," I exclaimed. "I have come to kill you." The monster tried to claw me with one of its huge hands and missed by inches. I observed at the time that this demon was on all fours and was more of an animal than a member of the fallen angels. I rushed towards it and used the pickaxe to slash its arm. All of a sudden, I heard a noise behind me, and I soon found that the knockers had decided to assist me in my efforts to kill the beast. I heard cries of "Our mines!" and "For freedom!" and I joined them in their cries. A group of knockers had managed to completely slash the flesh off of the demon's left arm and were making quick work of the exposed muscle. The monstrous demon roared in pain before swiping at the crowd of knockers with its right arm. I ran at the beast and jumped between its heads, landing on its back, where I found a few very surprised knockers hard at work destroying the monster. I took a bottle of holy water from my pocket and poured it onto a spot in the center of the demon's back. The monster's flesh began to bubble, and I rolled back one of my coat and shirt sleeves. I plunged my hand into the bubbling flesh and felt it sting. I pushed my hand through and felt it reached the beast's chest cavity. I retracted my hand, pulled out my crucifix from my pocket, and plunged it back in again. I heard the beast scream in agony, and I yelled above it for everyone to run. Jumping down from the beast's back, I picked up a couple of injured knockers and ran to the exit as fast as possible. I found that the lift had been sent down and was waiting for the last few stragglers to get into it. We travelled up at great speed and rushed out of the building. Caden made his way towards me and asked why we had needed to get out of the mine so quickly. Caden's answer came in the form of the building that covered the entrance exploding in an inferno of flame. "Where will you go now?" I asked, while walking back to my car with Caden. "There's plenty of mines in Cornwall," said the knocker. "We'll make our way to one of them. Thanks for killing a beast. We couldn't have done it without you." "I fear that my stay in Cornwall isn't going to end this quickly," I said, opening my car door. "I suspect that it is just the first of several incidents that are going to come to my attention." "I wish you luck," said Caden, before he began to walk away, back to his people of knockers. Part 4. As I arrived back at the ship inn, I thought that I heard a beeping sound coming from my back seat. I turned off the engine and span round. To my surprise, sitting on my back seat was a cardboard box and a note which was resting on top of it. I picked up the note and quickly read it through. "Hello, Sycamore. I knew you would be able to defeat my beast. Time is running out. Can you get rid of the explosive device? 30 seconds, starting from now. Yours, Vincent Straw." I jumped out of the car, opened the back passenger door, and picked up the box. Whatever type of bomb Vincent had used, it was damned heavy. I ran to the rail that prevented people from falling into the bay and threw the offensive item into the water with all of my strength. I ran back to my car and got inside just as a huge plume of water rose from the bay. After the water had fallen from the sky, I got back out of my car and made my way into the ship inn. Before I entered the building, I noticed that there was a greenish tinge to the air. I found Mrs. Oram cleaning her tables and whistling a tune. When she saw me, she asked, "What was that noise outside? You didn't crash, did you?" "It was just some kids messing around in the street," I replied. "They knocked over a bin. I told them to put it back into its proper place and go home." "I shouldn't even be out," said Mrs. Oram with a note of concern in her voice. "Not with the fog due to arrive." "Is the fog green?" I asked. "It is," replied Mrs. Oram. "Did you see it?" "Yes," I said. "I noticed a tinge in the air." "There's something wrong with that fog," said Mrs. Oram. "Something insidious. It's tainted with death." "Is it now?" I said, more to myself than to Mrs. Oram. "Are you going to bed now, Mr. Sycamore?" asked Mrs. Oram. "Yes," I said. "I don't think that I'll get much sleep though." "Oh, why's that?" "Just a feeling," I replied. "Just a feeling." I made my way to my room and locked the door. I opened up the box containing the codex and flipped through its ancient pages to the wanted section. I read for about an hour before I lay down on my bed. According to the codex, fog can hold the spirits of the dead. These spirits are rarely friendly and are usually suicide victims. I had read in newspapers at different points in time about people in Cornwall jumping from the cliffs after folding up their clothes and leaving them in a neat pile. After looking on the internet, I discovered that some 3,000 to 4,000 people had committed suicide by jumping from Cornwall's cliffs in the last century. Usually, fog will hold on to about 500 spirits, but I believed that the green fog in Cornwall had collected the spirits of the dead for centuries and could be holding an uncountable amount. I let these pieces of information tumble around my mind while I slept. I awoke with a start. Someone was breaking through the downstairs window and not doing a very good job of it. I opened one of my cases and pulled out a silver crucifix that I'd found once whilst wandering around a derelict Scottish monastery. It had been sticking out of the mud, surrounded by nettles, and I had brought it back to my home and cleaned it up. I walked steadily down the stairs and fully expected to see some sort of demon. Surprisingly, I found a skinny lad reaching for a phone on the wall. He was dressed in tight jeans and a vivid blue sweatshirt. "You've got to help me," he cried. "It took them." "What took who?" I asked. "Some giant man," said the lad. "He must have been 8 feet tall. He ripped Greg in half. He's coming for me next." "Who are you?" I asked. "Why are you in Cornwall?" "I'm part of a group of paranormal investigators called the Ghost Seekers. We had heard about a house that was supposedly haunted by a dead woman's spirit. We didn't find one, so we came here to have some fun. Then we saw him, a huge man, climbing one of the stairwells that fishermen use to get from their boats to dry land. He didn't come from a boat, though. He just appeared out of the water." "You must have done something to annoy him," I said. "We asked him if he was all right," said the lad. "He just grunted and asked where he could find someone called Patrick something or other." "What's going on down here?" asked Mrs. Autumn, storming down the stairs in her fluffy white dressing gown. "This lad has broken in through one of your windows to escape an 8-foot giant, who he says ripped one of his friends in half." "What a load of rubbish," said Mrs. Autumn. "He must be on drugs. I'm calling the police." "I don't think that's necessary," I said. "I think that we're about to get confirmation that this lad's story is true." "Why'd you say that?" "I just heard heavy footsteps outside the door." As I finished speaking, the door shattered inwards, and a huge, stooping figure stepped through the doorframe. The giant was a sickly white colour with not a hair on his body. He wore a pair of water-soaked trousers and rotting leather shoes. "Sycamore," he said in a thick Russian accent, "the hour of your death has come." "If I've got an hour left to live, then I should have enough time to deal with you," I said. The giant lunged at me and tried to grab my arm in a huge hand. I stepped easily to the side and touched the silver crucifix to his back. The giant winced a little before swinging his arm at my chest. I jumped back, causing him to miss by inches. "What is your name?" I asked. "Sergio," the giant replied. The monster picked up a chair and threw it at me. I stepped to the side and found my situation to be rather difficult. Sergio the giant had the reflexes of a panther and the strength of 10 men. I couldn't get close enough to touch him with my cross, which I realized is exactly what I was going to have to do. I jumped onto a chair and leapt at the huge man, waiting for him to grab me by the legs. Sergio did exactly what I had predicted he would do. He grabbed me by the legs and grinned. I soon wiped the grin off of his face when I pressed the silver crucifix hard against his bald head and sent him sprawling. The giant let go of me before falling, and I landed heavily on my back. This was extremely uncomfortable for me because of the bruises that had been caused by my fighting with the stone statue in Crowland. As I got to my feet, I heard the giant swear and ask where he was. Evidently, the touch of the crucifix to his forehead had caused him to become confused. Mrs. Autumn was standing open-mouthed in shock, while the lad I saw was cowering underneath a table, crying to himself. I heard a noise from the doorway, and in the shining moonlight saw a black, furry body. I let out a sigh of relief as I saw the gargantuan form of Black Shuck, the legendary beast of East Anglican folklore, squeeze through the doorway. The immense canine, who dwarfed everything around him, bared his teeth as he approached the slowly rising form of the stunned giant. Sergio saw the huge dog and jumped back a little as he realized that he was helpless compared to the power of Black Shuck. I had last seen Black Shuck in Loddon, where he had helped me in fighting Mother Churgrave's overgrown imps. He was evidently still hunting straw with the scent that I had provided for him at Cruden Bay. Black Shuck darted forward and grabbed the giant by the neck before he swung him around the room like a rag doll. The immense dog dragged the now limp body of Sergio out of the door, and I heard a distinct splash as his body made contact with the water in the bay. Black Shuck stepped back inside the pub and sat down. "Well," I said, walking over to the legendary beast, "I'm glad that's over." "What is that thing?" asked Mrs. Autumn, coming out of her shock. "This is Black Shuck," I said. "I think he's going to help me while I'm here." Part 5. Mrs. Autumn put the terror-stricken paranormal investigator into my room and locked the door. I pinned a tarpaulin across the outside of the broken doorframe to stop people from seeing Black Shuck asleep on the floor of the inn. After this task had been completed, I asked Mrs. Autumn to pour both of us a brandy, while I went up to my room and collected the codex. When I opened the door to my room, I found the paranormal investigator shivering on the bed, staring blankly at the wall. I made my way back down the stairs and sat down at one of the tables next to Mrs. Autumn. "I'd like to ask you something," I said to Mrs. Autumn, opening the codex to the last page. "I'm not sure why, but I have a feeling in my gut that you all know someone who looks like the woman in this illustration." Mrs. Autumn looked at the drawing on the page, and I watched as her eyes widened, her breathing became heavier, and she began to tremble. "Who is she?" "Alice," she said quietly. "Where does she live?" "I'll give you the address. It's at the top of Causeway Head, not too far from my favourite cafe. The cafe at the back of Mounts Bay Trading. It's not hard to find." "Thank you," I replied, pulling a scrap of paper and a pen from my pocket. "I wouldn't have anything to do with her if I were you," said Mrs. Autumn. I smiled while Mrs. Autumn wrote down the address. I made my way to my room, where I found the paranormal investigator was still in shock. I dragged the lad off of my bed and put him on the floor with a blanket over him. I lay down in the comfortable bed and dozed off to sleep. My dreams were filled with dark distortions and scenes of horrifying monsters. All of these dreams were tainted by a greenish colour, something that I found mystifying. I awoke at 8 o'clock in the morning, bathed, toileted, and made my way downstairs. The paranormal investigator had left while I'd been asleep. Mrs. Autumn was nowhere to be seen downstairs, so I decided that she must have still been in bed. I made my way to the kitchen, where I cooked up some bacon and eggs for myself while I grilled some sausages for Max. I ate my breakfast, washed up the dishes, and made my way to the car with Max and the case that held the codex. When I had come downstairs, Black Shuck had still been asleep. I just hoped that he didn't wake up while I was out. I turned on the radio and tuned it to the vintage channel that played mostly 1930s to 40s music. When I tuned in, putting on the Ritz by the Phil Spittleny Orchestra and the Danford Sisters had just come onto the air. It happened to be one of my favourite pieces of dance music. It took me about 20 minutes to reach Causeway Head in Penzance and park up. I walked along the high street for a while with Max on his leash. I went into a few shops along the way and bought myself a fridge magnet and a stick of rock. After reading the address on the piece of paper that Mrs. Autumn had written on, and asking a passerby for the general direction of the location, I found the house. The house was small, and its walls were a shiny granite grey. Its windowsills were painted a deep blue, and a similar colour had been used for the curtains. I walked up the short path in the front garden to the house and knocked thrice on the black wooden door. I heard the sound of footsteps from within the house, and I moved a small distance away from the door so that I did not impose on the personal space of Alice, as Mrs. Oram had called her. The door opened a crack, and I saw a face, partially covered by a silk scarf, present itself. "Can I help you?" said an old but strong voice. "I am looking for a woman who goes by the name of Alice," I said. "I have been led to believe that this is where she lives." "Aye, she lives here," said the woman. "May I come in and speak with her?" "You may." The black door opened further, and the small old woman walked down her hallway. I followed her after telling Max to sit outside the house. The small old woman led me to the living room of the house. "I'll make us a cup of tea, boyo," said the old lady, who disappeared into the kitchen for a few minutes. The term boyo, for some reason, made me feel young again. The small old woman came in and placed a tray with 2 cups of hot steaming tea and a packet of custard creams onto a coffee table. "Do you take milk or sugar?" asked the woman. "No," I replied, "but thank you for asking." "Would you like a biscuit, boyo?" queried the old lady. "Yes, please," I returned. The small old woman passed me my cup with 2 custard creams on the saucer. I took a bite of one of the biscuits and was stunned at how excellent it tasted. "Are you Alice?" I asked. "I might be," said the old woman. "If you were her, would you know anything about the Dark Ones?" "If I were her, then maybe I would," the woman replied. I took a sip of my tea, which I discovered was Earl Grey, and tasted better than any other cup that I had had before. "I have information that I wish to share with Alice," I said. "I require her assistance in thwarting a great evil. Do you think that she would help me?" "She might, boyo," said the old lady. "Am I in the company of Alice now?" I asked. "Quite possibly," said the woman, adjusting her scarf. As the old woman adjusted her scarf on her face, I caught a glimpse of a dark hole where her right eye should have been. At this point I realized that this was her way of confirming that she was Alice without verbally admitting it. "Will you help me?" I asked. "I might," said Alice. "Of course, I would have to know the problem. Right, boyo." "Would you like the elaborate version of the problem or the simple one?" I queried. "The simple one, my handsome." "I believe that I will need, say, no more than 2 words to describe the problem." "Go on," said Alice, sitting back into her chair. "Vincent Straw." I saw a slight tension appear in Alice's shoulders, and the room in the air became cool. "Tell me more," said Alice. Part 6. After about an hour and a half of talking to Alice about the situations that I had found myself in with Vincent Straw, I found my throat dry. The old lady got up from her seat and made her way to the kitchen, for which she soon returned with more tea. "Do you have any questions?" I asked, after taking a sip of tea. "No," Alice replied. "Do you have any advice?" "No," said Alice. "What should I do?" I asked. "Kill him," said Alice. I felt oddly satisfied with Alice's answer. I don't know why, but I did. "I'm going to the shops," said Alice. "I need to get some eggs. You can help me put my coat on." Alice finished her tea, got up from her chair, and made her way into the hallway. I followed and helped her to put on a knee-length black overcoat. We stepped outside and were greeted by Max. As we walked to the end of the short path, Alice made an almost silent remark. "You should talk to William Maguire from Liverpool. He might be able to help you." At the end of the path, I thanked Alice for her time, and we separated. I had forgotten about Bill. he had helped me in destroying the evil that was Granny Rambles. As I walked back to my car with Max, I remembered an article in Reuters that I had read recently about the Liverpool Echo having access to a huge amount of historical files. If there was anyone who would be able to tell me anything about Vincent Straw, then it would be Bill. I drove back to Mrs. Oram's inn and entered the building through the back door. Mrs. Oram had left a note in the kitchen explaining that she had gone out to buy a few things from the shops and that she'd be back at about 3 in the afternoon. I made my way to the staff room and found the phone. I called the operator and asked her to connect me with the chief editor of the Liverpool Echo's office. "Just a moment," said the operator in her mechanically saccharine sweet voice. The phone began to ring and someone picked up the receiver. Bill's voice caused my receiver to vibrate.
"Simpkins, if I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times. Stop calling my office. You failed to get the story done on why people in this city don't like Bounty chocolate bars. Just because you don't like them doesn't mean you have the right not to do your job. And just for your information, I happen to like Bounties. They're the perfect combination of coconut and chocolate."
"Bill," I interrupted. The chief editor went silent before saying, "Is that you, Patrick?" "It is," I replied. "I rather like Bounties as well." This comment resulted in an eruption of laughter from Bill, which lasted a good 2 minutes according to my wristwatch. "It's been over a year since we've spoken," said Bill. "What do you need?" "I need all of the information that you can gather on a person called Vincent Straw." "Hold on a minute," said Bill. "Did you say Vincent Straw?" "I did." "Strange that you mentioned it. I've been skimming through a new database of files we've recently gained access to, and that particular name keeps popping up in the mythological section." "Really?" I said. "Yes," said Bill. "Do you know that Vincent comes from the Roman name Vincentius, which was derived from Latin vincere, meaning to conquer? Apparently this name was popular among early Christians, and it was borne by many saints, and as an English name, Vincent has been in use since the Middle Ages, though it did not become common until the 19th century. To conquer, I muttered to myself. Tell me more." "It seems," began Bill, "Vincent Straw has been involved in one way or another with every terrible thing that humanity has done for the past 5,000 years. It begins around the time of the civil wars between Horusbird and Snefurka. Its existence is disputed, but the tomb which held Snefurka's body contained hieroglyphs to do with a tall man who brought about his downfall. There's no name mentioned, but it looks like a possible link. The tall man then pops up again in the campaigns of Eonatum, where he is referenced as being a person of great strength but mysterious. Then there's a huge gap before he pops up again in the conquests of Hammurabi, where he is the commander of the armies. There are hundreds of instances from all around the world throughout time where a tall man is referenced as holding a high position of power. But during the 454 AD Germanic Hunnic Wars, he makes his last appearance and disappears without a trace. It's in 1854 that he once again rears his head as a commander during the Crimean War. He washed up on a beach after the November 14th Great Storm of 1854 in the Black Sea, in which 19 British transport ships and other foreign vessels supporting the Crimean War were wrecked with the loss of at least 287 men. He continues to make mysterious appearances during the 1800s and early 1900s. The last recorded mention of this tall man is in Germany during the Second World War under the name Vincent Straw. Apparently he was Hitler's second in command and even took over as leader in 1944 when the mad bastard was recovering from the July 20th plot. "Are you absolutely sure that this is the last time he reveals himself?" I asked. 100%. "Thank you," I said. "You're a good friend, Bill. I'll be in touch soon." "Sycamore," said Bill. "I don't know where you are or what you're doing, but be careful. Vincent is a dangerous man. He's dangerous." "I'll be careful," I replied. "You have my oath on that." Part 7. I was just going upstairs to have a much-needed bath when I heard Mrs. Oram come in through the back door. I went back downstairs and saw Mrs. Oram had disappeared behind the counter. "Mrs. Oram," "Are you quite all right?" I asked.
"Yes, dear," replied a croaking voice that didn't sound anything like Mrs. Oram. "I'm all right." I felt something touch my shoulder, and I turned round to see who it was. Black Shuck had silently risen from his sleeping position and come quietly to my side. I heard a low, almost silent growl grow from within the enormous canine's chest. I put my fingers to my lips and walked over to the counter. A heinous creature rose up from behind the counter. Standing on 3 spindly legs and 8 feet tall, the monster crawled over the counter and looked at me with its yellow eyes. Pus dripped from its mouth, and its arms, though human in form, were abnormally long. "It is your time to die," said the hell creature. "Why?" I asked. "It is the wish of my master." "Straw?" I queried. "No," returned the hideous monster. "Satan!" Unbeknownst to the hell creature, I had put my hand in my pocket and wrapped one of my numerous rosaries around my fingers. "Tell Satan," I said, pulling the rosary from my pocket, "that he'll have to come and kill me himself." Using all of my strength, I smashed through the monster's jutting out teeth and plunged the rosary deep into its hot, foul-smelling throat. The creature tried to cut through its own throat to remove the holy item, but quickly fell to the floor, twitching slightly for a few moments before becoming completely still. "Ugly thing," I said to myself. Black Shuck came over and sniffed the carcass of the hell creature before pushing it away with one of his huge paws. Why did Satan want to kill me? I'd had to deal with his demons before, but he'd never sent one specifically to kill me. As I stroked behind the ear of Black Shuck, I heard a crackling sound like that caused by burning wood. I felt Black Shuck become tense and his hair stood up. "Speak of the devil," I said. "Speak of me and I will come," said a voice. I turned and saw a man standing in a grey suit holding a leather-bound business case in one hand. "So," I said, "you finally decided to come and try to kill me yourself." Now, Mr. Sycamore," said the devil. "I'm here to make a deal. It's the easy way of obtaining a soul." "You won't succeed in your efforts," I replied. "Even if it meant the end of a certain Vincent Straw?" I laughed out loud when I heard him say that. "Come here," I said to the king of hell. Satan walked towards me and extended his hand. "It's a deal then," said the devil. I raised my hand and landed a hard blow to the devil's abdomen, which sent him sprawling onto the floor. Vincent Straw isn't just someone that can be gotten rid of. He's more powerful than you are. He controls demons stronger than yours. Only God can destroy him, or the Guardian. "The Guardian?" said the devil, giving me a look of genuine fear. The devil got up from the floor and straightened his tie. "I'd better be going then," he said. "This meeting has been highly unproductive." Lucifer disappeared in a burst of flame, leaving the stench of burnt hair in the room. "When does this big dog of yours have to be fed?" said a familiar voice. I turned to see Mrs. Oram putting down her shopping bags. "He doesn't need to be fed," I replied. "He's an immortal." "Not him, silly," said Mrs. Oram. "I mean your dog." "Now would be a fine time," I returned. "I think he'll be only too happy to have his dinner." I made my way to the foot of the stairs and was just about to walk up them to prepare a bath when I called to Mrs. Oram, "I'm going to bathe and go out immediately afterwards. I won't be back until late tonight." "You mustn't!" cried out the woman. I walked to the kitchen and found her shaking with fright. "Why must I not go out?" I asked. "It's the fog," she replied. "You'll think me mad for saying it, but the fog is evil. It's filled with tortured souls." "I'll be fine," I stated, before leaving the kitchen and going up the stairs. I had my bath and thought about what Mrs. Oram had said. I put on a fresh set of clothes and went downstairs. I found Max asleep on the floor next to Black Shuck, who looked up from his position.
"Meet me outside," I said quietly to the legendary dog. I went into the kitchen to leave through the door, and found Mrs. Oram sitting with her head in her hands. "What's wrong?" I asked. "What can I do?" "Don't go into the fog," she replied. "It's cursed. I assure you, nothing will happen to me." I left the inn and walked to my car, where I found my giant canine ally sitting. "Where is he?" I said to Black Shuck. The huge dog sniffed the air and looked around the car park. "Lead me," I said, getting into my car. I started the engine and followed Black Shuck through the roads. The green fog was thick, and I could only just see Black Shuck with the use of my headlights. As I drove, I'm sure that I felt the car being pushed at the sides, like something or someone was trying to push me over. I closed the vents to prevent the green fog from seeping in, just in case Mrs. Oram's fears came to pass. I followed Black Shuck in the fog, and I became cold, but did not dare to open the vents so that the heater could work. It wasn't long before Black Shuck stopped and looked at me, his fur wet with the dampness of the air. I turned off the engine and made my way to the huge dog. Black Shuck guided me to a red sign with the name of the location. "St. Michael's Mount," I said. I saw a flash of bright lightning, which was followed by booming thunder. "Welcome," said a voice which I knew only too well. "Vincent," I cried, "I am going to stop you, even if it costs me my life." "You will not succeed," said Vincent's voice, which seemed to be coming from the castle on the island that was slowly becoming visible as the fog drifted away from it. "But you will still lose your life." I felt within my inside coat pocket and made sure that it contained the box that held the thorn that I had obtained from the Vatican. I whispered into Black Shuck's ear to stay where he was. I began to walk down the damp, dark causeway to the castle. Part 8. The causeway was somewhat slippery, and I felt as though a great crowd was watching my every move. There probably was. Lightning flashed in the sky, thunder boomed, and it began to rain. "Come," Vincent taunted. "Soon this will all be over. For me, anyway." "That is correct," I said, half to myself, half to Vincent. "For you." I reached the island and walked along its dark, foggy streets. The castle loomed like some squatting troll beneath a bridge, waiting for prey to walk by, so that it could snatch the victim. I heard growls from the bushes, footsteps behind me, whispers in my ear, but I ignored them. A red glow came from the windows of the castle, and grew brighter as I approached it. "I hope the rain isn't too cold for you," Vincent's voice said. "I wouldn't want you to catch a cold." "I would travel across the Arctic if I had to," I returned. The doors of the great castle opened, and I saw Vincent standing in the doorway. I took my favourite exorcist's crucifix from my pocket and rushed the figure. As I impacted with Vincent, I found myself in a cloud of black, buzzing flies. "Stop playing tricks," I yelled. "I've had enough of you. For too long you have tainted this world, caused terrible things, performed heinous acts. If you have any honor left in your black soul, then come and face me yourself." I heard the sound of gigantic footsteps behind me and span round. 2 huge demons, some 15 feet tall, were walking towards the doorway. They had huge hands, and their fingers were tipped with long black nails. "I'll face you when I feel like it," said Vincent. I pulled a rosary from my pocket and threw it at the doorway and said a quick prayer, sealing the doorway and thus stopping the demons from entering. The 2 monsters stopped and were just beginning to walk away when Vincent's voice said,
Don't leave, you fools. What can one rosary do to you?
Evidently, Straw didn't realize that the rosary was a seal, and I watched with an odd sense of satisfaction as the demons bent down to get through the doorway, and whilst crawling past the rosary, caught fire. Their skin burst into flames, and the smell of burning flesh filled the air. "You see, Vincent," I said, "I can play tricks too." The ground beneath me began to rumble, and I saw it explode 10 feet away in a shower of stone and earth. A huge, centipede-like creature had risen from the ground and stared down at me. Its peculiar black eyes seemed to pierce my very soul. I ran to a narrow corridor and heard the monster pursue me on its many feet. I pulled a bottle of holy water from my coat pocket and pulled out the cork. I stepped out of the corridor and faced the beast. As soon as it saw me, the monstrous creature started towards me. Its jaws opened, and I felt its hot, putrid breath on my face. I threw the open bottle of holy water into the monster's open mouth and rushed back to the narrow corridor. The beast's cries echoed through the castle, and I smelled the odour of burning. I walked back out of the corridor and saw that the centipede-like monster was lying on its back with its undercarriage on fire. "We can still make a deal," said a voice behind me. I turned and hit out, landing the devil himself a blow that sent him sprawling onto the floor. "I won't make a deal with you," I stated. "If you're so worried about Vincent stealing your bloody thunder, then why don't you do something off of your own back?" "Aha," I heard Vincent's voice say. "Lucifer himself has come to stop me." "You are right," the devil said to me. "I will fight him myself. Maybe then you'll realize that I am the stronger force of evil." A whirlwind of black smoke span before us, and I watched as Vincent walked out and looked with piercing eyes at Satan. The devil raised one hand and sent forth a ball of white fire. As it was about to strike, I saw Vincent wave one hand in the air, which sent the fireball in another direction. "My turn," said Straw. Raising both of his hands, Vincent shot bolts of lightning at his adversary. The devil was thrown onto his back, but was soon on his feet again. I watched Lucifer focus his mind and try to trap Vincent in a box of hellfire. Vincent laughed and walked through the fire. "So, this is the best that a fallen angel can do," said Straw. The devil rushed at Vincent with his fist raised to land a devastating blow. Vincent grabbed the devil's hand with ease and said, "You are the master of hell. Whenever you make a deal, you look into your victim's soul and see what it is like." Vincent seized Lucifer's head and held it to his. "Look into my soul," said Straw. "Look deep, look hard, and then compare me to yourself." The devil's eyes locked with Straw's, and I watched as his face contorted with horror. Lucifer's whole body quivered and he collapsed to the floor. Vincent walked away slowly. I ran over to the devil and found him shivering. "Hell is frozen over," he said. "He tricked me! Me!" "What do you mean?" I said. "Through my link with hell," replied Lucifer. "He has turned it into an icy wasteland. I must go and thaw it out. Now!" I stepped back and watched as Lucifer, the fallen angel and ruler of hell, seemed to try and open his fiery portal, but instead became frozen. The devil was dead. "Vincent," I yelled, "you faced the devil. Now face me. Or do you fear me, a mere mortal?" I heard laughter ring through the air. I felt a hand land gently on my shoulder and Vincent's voice say, "You can strike the first blow. I was still holding my exorcist's crucifix, and so, when I span round, I pressed it hard against Vincent's chest and punched him in the chin. Vincent looked down at the cross that was pressed against his chest and began to laugh. Straw grabbed the cross and threw it to one side. "That might work on some, but not me," he said. "Let's fight," I said. I landed a blow to Vincent's chest and sent him to the floor. Vincent disappeared, and I was pushed from behind. I turned and saw Vincent move towards me at lightning speed. I darted to one side, grabbed the monster by the arm, and flung him to the floor. Vincent grabbed me by the leg and said, "Let's go somewhere more scenic, shall we?" A black cloud surrounded us, and I became cold. I had lost my grip on Vincent's leg and couldn't see through the dark. The black cloud slowly disappeared and was replaced with a dark green fog. I heard the crash of waves and tasted salt in the air. "Have you ever flown before?" asked Vincent through the fog. "Yes," I replied. "Good. Then you'll enjoy your trip down to the bottom of the cliff." I dropped to the ground and felt with my hands to see if I could find the edge of the cliff. "That's it. Scrapple like the animal that you are," said Vincent's insidious voice. When my hand found the edge of the cliff, I turned in the opposite direction and ran. After about a minute, I stopped and listened. I could hear whispers. I couldn't work out exactly what it was that they were saying. Neither could I work out the direction from which they came. "Do you hear that?" I heard Vincent say. "Over several hundred years, my fog has captured the souls of thousands of suicide victims. They are mine to command." I searched my coat pocket and took out the box that held the thorn. I took out the thorn, which was around 2 inches long, and waited. "Bring him to me," said Vincent. I was shoved by an invisible force in this and that direction. Hands clawed my back, fists pummeled my chest, teeth bit my legs, and sharp nails dug into my arms. Vincent appeared to materialize out of the fog and stood before me like some sinister vulture watching a helpless animal die. "You're 3 feet away from the edge of the cliff," said Vincent. "I'm going to personally shove you off of it." Vincent came towards me, and as he extended his arms to push me, I leapt at him and stabbed him in the chest with the thorn. Vincent yelled out with pain and threw me off to one side. I got up and watched Vincent stagger onto his feet. "Very clever," I heard him say, "but I can easily regain my immortality." Vincent faced me and told his invisible slaves to seize me. "This is the final curtain," said Straw. "An end to our struggle. You were fun to play with, but all good things must come to an end." I felt myself being dragged slowly towards the cliff by the many invisible hands. I fought against them, but it was in vain. I couldn't loosen their grip for 1 second. I accepted my fate and prayed to God to forgive me for my failing him. I must have been a foot away from the cliff edge when it happened. The sound of thunder boomed through the air, and the hands that had gripped me left. "What is going on?" cried Vincent. I watched as Straw seemed to be lifted up many feet into the air by some gigantic, invisible hand. I watched Vincent shoot lightning from his hands, saw him struggling against the unseen fingers that gripped him. Then, the whispering stopped and the green fog cleared. I'll never be absolutely certain if I saw this phenomena, but, just for a moment, I thought I saw the partially covered face of Alice high above in the sky. I saw Straw thrashing vainly against the force that held him. All of a sudden, Vincent became limp, his head touching his chest. Vincent dropped from the sky and fell past me down to the bottom of the cliff into the icy water. No body was ever reported to have been found washed up on the beaches of Cornwall in the following weeks. I stared into the sky to see whether or not the face that I thought I had seen was still there, but it was not. I began to walk. Part 9. I made my way to a road and followed it into an estate. I knocked on the door of a house, which was opened by a friendly old gentleman. The old gentleman took me into his living room and sat me down on a very comfortable settee. "What happened?" he asked. "It's too hard to explain," I said. I felt an intense hot pain in my chest and all down my left arm. "Would you do me a favour?" I asked. "What is it?" asked the old gentleman. "Would you call an ambulance? I do believe I'm having a heart attack." The old man called the emergency services and explained what was going on. I fell unconscious at intervals and soon found myself in an ambulance. "What happened?" I heard one of the paramedics ask me. "Heart attack," I replied. I thought that it was pretty obvious. Everything went black. After a little while, I saw a pinprick of light in the darkness. It slowly grew bigger, and I felt a comfortable warmth radiating from it. I wanted to enter into the light, but something in the back of my mind told me not to, that I was not ready. The light began to shrink and soon disappeared. I opened my eyes and was dazzled by a doctor's penlight. "Please, turn off the light," I said. "Are you all right?" asked the doctor. "Do you remember what happened?" "I do," I replied. "A bunch of brutes attacked me when I pulled up near the causeway at St. Michael's Mount." "Do you know what they look like?" asked a large man walking into the room, who was evidently a police detective. "I'm afraid not," I replied. "You sure?" asked the detective. "Positive," I returned. "We should leave him to rest," said the doctor. The doctor and the detective left the room, leaving me alone with my own thoughts. An hour later, I dug my clothes out of the drawer that they had been neatly folded into and left. No one stopped me. I took a taxi to where my car was parked and paid the driver double. I wondered if Black Shuck had left and gone back to his home, or if he was currently asleep on Mrs. Oram's barroom floor. I got into my car and drove to Causeway Head in Penzance. I parked up and made my way to a cafe restaurant and bought 2 bacon rolls and 2 cups of coffee. I walked down the street and made my way up Alice's path. I heard someone say something about me being mad, but I ignored them. I knocked on the door and heard someone slowly walk to it. The old door opened and I saw Alice look at me. "Hello, my handsome. Would you like to come in?" "Yes, please," I replied. I bought us some breakfast. We made our way into the living room and sat down. I handed Alice one of the bacon rolls and cups of coffee, and we sat eating without speaking a word. After we had drunk the coffee, Alice asked me a question. "Is your problem gone?" "Yes," I replied. "Gone forever, I believe." "Good," said Alice. "Very good, my lovely." For just a moment, I thought that I saw the flicker of a smile on Alice's face. "Can I interest you in a cup of tea?" Alice asked. "Yes, please," I replied. "That would be delightful."